Hi, Jim. This is Dean from the Upper Midwest. My question is regarding umbrella insurance coverage, and more specifically, how much is needed. I have read and heard people say that you should have enough umbrella coverage that would roughly equal your assets that are at risk in a potential liability lawsuit. However, consider this scenario to illustrate. What if I had, say, $1 million in assets, maybe in a taxable account? I therefore obtain a $1 million umbrella policy. However, I get sued by someone that slips on my driveway, gets injured, and they win a judgment for the amount of 2 million or maybe more dollars. The umbrella policy would only partially cover that judgment amount, and the remaining amount could then wipe out my assets. So, is it therefore the case that I could only be expected to pay the maximum amount of my assets at risk, $1 million dollars in my example, which would be covered by the umbrella insurance policy, and that the assets are really therefore safe? Otherwise, the logic to obtain enough coverage that equals the amount of assets, to me, maybe seems faulty. Thanks for everything. I really do appreciate it.
Yep, it's faulty logic. I've been talking about this for a long time. The amount of umbrella insurance coverage that you need is the amount of the judgment that comes against you. That judgment's $100,000, you need $100,000. If that judgment is 10 million, you need 10 million. If there's no judgment ever, you don't need umbrella insurance. The problem is you can't know that in advance, so it's guesswork. And yes, any amount above that isn't protected or exempted in some other way, if the plaintiff and their attorney decide to go after it, is certainly at risk. So here's some guidelines I think you should use. And they're similar to what I recommend when it comes to malpractice insurance. With malpractice insurance, I recommend you have the amount similar to other specialists in your specialty in your geographic area. So if everyone's carrying 1 million, 3 million coverage, you should get a 1 million, 3 million policy. That does a couple of things. One, it says, hey, I did the right thing. I bought insurance. Something bad happened. I'm really sorry about it. Here's $1 million, right? And so that gives something for both the plaintiff and their attorney to say, hey, we got what we wanted out of this case. We're not going to go after that doctor's personal assets. And that's usually what happens, is they're willing to settle for policy limits. On the umbrella side, it's not nearly as standardized, but I think a lot of the same principles apply. You want to have enough money to do a few things. One, you want the insurance company to provide a robust defense, right? You don't want them to go, well, you only got a $50,000 policy. We're just going to pay that and move on. We don't want to spend a bunch of time defending this. You want them to have a lot of money on the line, like 7 figures, right? The other thing you want is in the event that something happened, that you can actually compensate that person, not feel bad that they got hurt. Right? That's a wonderful thing about insurance is you can go, hey, I'm really sorry about that. At least we have this great insurance policy I've been paying premiums on for years that we can make you whole. So that's a great thing too. And then third, I think you want to have enough money that plaintiff and their attorney feel like they got a lot of money. Okay. For most people, getting $1 million feels like a lot of money. And so that's where I'd start with your umbrella policy. Now, usually that means you got to increase your auto and homeowners or renters policy up to about $300,000 of liability. And then the umbrella sits on top of that. But I think that's probably where most people ought to start. Even a resident probably needs a $1 million umbrella policy. As your assets that are exposed increase, as your income increases, as your net worth increases, you can afford a little more. And so I think it's entirely reasonable to go to 2, 3, 5 million even. And again, this isn't malpractice insurance. It's way cheaper than malpractice insurance. That $1 million policy probably only costs $200 to $500 a year. And even a 5 million policy, you're probably spending less than $1,500 a year. And so it's not super expensive insurance, but it protects a lot, right? In any asset protection situation, insurance is your first line of defense. And so I think the amount that most physicians ought to be carrying as far as umbrella policy goes 1 to 5 million. Now, does that mean that's going to cover every single possible judgment that could ever be brought against you? No, but it's going to cover the vast, vast majority. And it's going to be enough money that most plaintiffs and their attorneys are going to go, all right, I feel satisfied. I got a couple $1 million. I don't feel a need to go after this doctor's taxable account or force them to sell their house and declare bankruptcy or go after their Tesla or something like that, right? And so I think for the most part, that's enough. But there's no guarantees. There's no 100% guarantee in anything asset protection related. There's always the possibility, however rare it might be, of an above policy limits judgment where you would have to declare bankruptcy and all you would get to keep are those assets that are exempt under your state and federal laws, which usually means your retirement accounts and a little bit of your home equity. And so keep that in mind. That's basically how asset protection works. The good news, you're probably never going to need it. If you want your questions answered by the White Coat Investor, record your question at whitecoatinvestor.com/YQA or click the link in the description.
My dad, your host, Dr. Dolly, is a practicing emergency physician, blogger, author, and podcaster. He is not a licensed accountant, attorney, or financial advisor, so this podcast is for your entertainment and information only and should not be considered official, personalized financial advice.